Thank you, everybody. I'm Paul Fahy. I'm the Artistic Director of Galway International Arts Festival. Great to see a nice full house this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming along. We're delighted to welcome Eímear Noone as part of this talk. So I also want to just acknowledge and thank NUI Galway, who are our education partner, and also our associate presenters of First Thought. I'll just leave my watch here so I can keep an eye on the time. We have an action-packed First Thought programme over this coming weekend and the following weekend with an incredibly diverse programme from fantastic creative people like Eimear and a lot of other various hot topics of the day that will be up for discussion. So I'm going to refer to my notes as I introduce Eimear, because I want to pay a proper accolade to how wonderful she is and how lucky we are to have such an amazing artist come out of Galway. And we'll start our conversation then. So Eimear is a conductor and an award-winning Irish composer, composing extensively for film and video games. As one of the world's premier composers of game scores, Eimear is responsible for some of the most enduring soundscapes on World of Warcraft and other best-selling video games. Through her music on World of Warcraft, Eimear's music has reached over 100 million people and continually inspires players to invert and build new worlds for nearly 15 years. Her composition portfolio of 26 films and video game titles have received multiple industry accolades, including the Hollywood Music and Media Award for Best Video Game Score. Recently, Eimear composed the score for the animated feature film 2x2 Overboard, which topped the UK box office in October 2020, and is currently working on various other global film, TV, and animation soundtracks, which we'll talk about in a little bit. She's also worked on film scores for directors such as Gus Van Sant and Joe Dante, orchestrating for the Oscar nominee Javier Negrete, and creating haunting music for thrillers like Mirrors and The Hole. I read a great quote when I was just doing a little bit of research during the week from the English Times, which said, if you've ever battled wolves at the gates of, I can't even pronounce it, Drowned, because the gaming world is not my world, so I'd be fascinated to learn, or helped Link rescue Princess Ada, then the chances are you've been moved by the music of Eímear Noone, and we certainly have. But alongside composing, Eimear conducts orchestras worldwide, and notably in 2020, Eimear made history by becoming the first female conductor to perform at the 92nd Academy Award ceremony, where she conducted. Recent highlights have included a sold-out video game concert at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and conducting the Witches' Seed Opera, or about to conduct it next week in Rome, which has been composed by Stuart Copeland from The Police, with some additional music by Chrissie Hynde from The Pretenders. So I think it's fair to say she revels in innovation, and she's also combined live performance with virtual reality, 3D and motion sensors. In 2019, she toured Europe with an orchestra performing along to the hologram of the late soprano Maria Callas. She divides her time between Los Angeles and County Galway, where she is originally from, with her Emmy-nominated composer husband, Craig Stewart Garfinkel, and their children. So, Eimear, we're almost exhausted listening to the depth and breadth of what you have done. So we might go way back to the beginning and just talk about kind of growing up in County Galway. And sure. Did you grow up in a musical home? I know where you're from, and Kilconnell is kind of a richly steeped in traditional music.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very typical, and I think we take it for granted how healthy and how rich growing up in the countryside in Galway actually is. You know, I didn't have light pollution, noise pollution. I still have my top end, as we call it, my hearing. I can hear very, very high frequencies because there was no noise pollution when I was growing up. I went to the local national school down the road, where my own son goes now half of the year. And my father went, and my aunts and uncles went. And across the road from the school lived the village composer, Paddy Fahy, who might be a relative of yours. We're still trying to figure it out. I don't think he is. We've tried to track a few of those connections before, but they're not there, unfortunately. Well, Paddy, I mean, his tunes were really quite unique, different. He definitely had his own style, and I say had, the music's still alive. We lost Paddy just a couple of years ago at the ripe young age of 102.
Incredible.
So I have a little Paddy story that I want to tell you that I never get to tell in interviews. So I adored him. And first of all, you know, in career guidance at school and all, you have you can be a teacher, nurse, doctor, bank, commerce, which we used to call it, business studies, whatever. And to me, we were in a farming community. We had a lot of people working in the hospital in Portiuncula and Ballinsloe and things like that. But we had a composer, and that was a thing, and that was a job, and that was something you could be, as far as I was concerned. And that's the great thing about it. If you can see it, you can be it. You know, that was absolutely normal, because there he was. He lived across the road from the school. So Paddy would rather talk about farming most of the time. But I went for a walk out across his land once, and he was telling me about the slopes of Aughrim, you know, doing fundraising in the early days of Fianna Fáil and so on in East Galway, playing gigs in this big Georgian house that he owned at the time. But he has all these different tunes, of course, and one of them is called the Echoey Beach. And Paddy brought me out in the field and underneath this little beech tree, and he goes, and his hair used to grow outwards instead of up or down, you know. And I was about, I think, first or second year in music college. I was in Trinity, and he brings me out, the wellies on, the whole thing, underneath the tree, and he goes, yeah, this is where I wrote the Echoey Beach about this tune about this here. He goes, watch this, echo, beat, echo, back. And he goes, you try it now, you try it. Okay, echo, beat, echo. He goes, I'll do it again, echo. And, you know, there's a neighbour walking down the road, and they're like, how are you? You know? Nothing unusual nothing to see here, like, you know. But, I mean, just a little bit, that's the other thing I think about the countryside. Character is important and revered. A little bit of eccentricity is fine, you know.
And so, but was there much music though in your house? Like, did your parents play, or did you listen to much music when you were young?
No, my grandfather was a very talented amateur musician, trad musician. Unfortunately, he died before I was born. But my mother, through him, really was insistent on music education. And my dad had his record collection. He had Simon and Garfunkel, Thin Lizzy, Shakin' Stevens. Behind the Green Door came out every Christmas, you know, and it was just such a random collection. But we had no orchestral music in that collection. It was just, I remember Dad showing me on TV this gentleman with big white hair and tails, with this group of musicians playing. They were so vibrant and so alive, and this music was so full of life. I was about 7 years old, and I remember it specifically. And hi, Nina. Nina Hines, amazing singer-songwriter who's Irish and lives in Berlin. So I'm not going to make you take a vow. So it was, you know, I was just fascinated instantly. I remember seeing your man and going, oh yeah, I'll do that. I was about 7. And here's the thing is, there was nobody to tell me it was impossible, because it was such a small area, you know. There were, 9 in my class in national school, and you know.
Well, if you were out howling at trees, I suppose.
Yeah, if you were, yeah, but I was an adult by that point. But
so to move on then to when you went to Dublin to study. So like, how accomplished were you at that point in terms of performing? And was that what you were interested in, or were you interested in conducting or composing, or? So
right away, I wanted to be a composer and a conductor, and. I loved playing, and anything I could get my hands stuck into. So I went to the local national school, then I went to Art School where I'm in Ballinasloe, and I joined the musical society. So I was playing traditional music, but on both trad instruments and concert flute. I was doing all my grades on the piano, but when I was 15, I got a free job, being assistant music director for the Ballinasloe Music Society. So I had to learn all the Broadway tunes and prep the singers and coach the singers, and you know, it was amazing. And then Sister Vianney was 80 and she had the school orchestra. So anytime she got tired, she let me conduct the orchestra. And I was in about, you know, second year at school, 14, 15. And I go, Sister, are you tired? Are you tired? You know? And so I'd get to do that very, very young. But when I was 12, in first week at school, Sister Mercedes, God bless her, lovely, lovely woman, taught us career guidance. It kind of seems funny to have a nun teaching career guidance, but now, as an adult, I realise nuns actually have like 2 or 3 careers as well as being a nun, you know? So first week we had to write what I want to do for my career, or what I want to be when I grow up or something. And I wrote, I will conduct the orchestra at La Scala. And poor Sister Mercedes, she didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, well, what are your other interests? I was, okay, it was medicine or something else. So by the time I got to third year, I was getting so much hassle about studying music that I dropped all my science subjects so that they would stop hassling me to do, go into the medical side of things. And it's interesting because when I was at college, the other option, career option for most people was medicine or mathematics. And I loved science. But I thought, if I have no science subjects for the Leaving Cert, they can't hassle me anymore. So it was very much, I remember it seems like a lot of things I did, I was moonlighting as somebody else, or I shouldn't have been there. And these things are so important to remember as a professional, the impact that professionals, my angels, had on me as a young musician, because we didn't have any contacts. We didn't know anybody in classical music. I was from a small village outside of a small town. Ballinasloe is now it's about 6,000 people, and everything was almost by accident. I won a competition in the town hall, Reach for a Star. I was 14, and I played Mozart's D major flute concerto. And I'd been playing in the town band. I'd been playing flute and piccolo. And I won the competition. So the local publican in Kilconnell, his wife's brother-in-law was managing the Irish Chamber Orchestra, and he was coming to visit. So they called up the house, come down, meet John Kelly. So I come down, and I was full of the joys after winning this competition. He said, we have this famous Italian flutist coming to Dublin to do a masterclass. And this is a story I rarely tell. So I come up having, I didn't know anybody, came up to Dublin and did this masterclass on a borrowed instrument from the Ballinasloe Town Band that I knew how to take apart and put together. And I'm not kidding you, keep some of the springs down with little elastic bands I got with my braces, my train tracks. I'm not joking. That's how fancy we were, And get up in front of Marzio Conti is his name, and I played the Mozart D major, and he just stop. What is that you're playing on? And he takes my instrument. And I played a good couple of minutes of the concerto anyway. And he holds it up and he shows it to all the ones from the Royal Irish Academy and the College of Music, and everybody started laughing.
Oh.
Yeah. And he said, you can't play on this thing, And here am I after winning this competition. I'm playing concerti, and you can't play on this thing. And he's making a laugh of me and making a joke. And, maybe he was being wonderful and I was being oversensitive. But when you're 14, 15 years of age, and in your identity, I am an artist. It's forget that's not what I'm going to do. That's who I am, And there was a beautiful person in the audience called Ciarán O'Connell. And Ciarán was one of the principal flute teachers at the Conservatory of Music, now TU, the Conservatory in Dublin. He said, I'll teach you for free for 6 months and we'll do the entrance test for the conservatory. And he did, in build out the principal flute for the National Symphony's flute shop, in the back of the shop, taught me. I'd go down to Dublin, and then I got the scholarship. I held the scholarship at the College of Music for 8 years after that.
And so when you're in the College of Music, I know you were clearly, you had huge ambition in terms of what you wanted to achieve, and I know you took on. Didn't you bring together an orchestra and perform at the concert hall? Was it when you were like 19 or 20?
Yes.
So speaking of industry and commerce that you referenced earlier on, clearly the commerce teacher had some influence on you. But tell us a little bit about that, because that's an incredible story.
Well, to finish off that last one, after that day, I had to start again learning the instrument. I literally had to forget everything I knew and play long notes for 6 months, So anyway, that taught me a lot in terms of tenacity, getting a knock and picking yourself up and building yourself back up from nothing. So when I was 19 in Trinity, a classmate and I set up an orchestra, and in a very grandiose way, we called ourselves the Dublin City Concert Orchestra, because I think that was a name that wasn't taken. So our first concert was at the Pepper Canister in Dublin, and our second concert was at the National Concert Hall. And everything.
Did you produce that then? Did you
Yes.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, stop. Oh, I did takedowns of some of the music that we couldn't get hold of. I was around the corner from college in the post office, putting coins, calling Los Angeles to get parts from Franz Waxman, the composer's son, who had all the parts for Braveheart in his collection. And he said to me, you know, this is really a difficult piece to perform. It's got a strange instrument called the Uelian pipes. I don't think you guys can do this one. And I was like, what is he talking about? I was like, I know every note of this score, you know. We listened to the scores obsessively, myself and Gillian Saunders, my classmate. I was like, do you mean the Uilleann pipes? And he goes, no, the Uelian pipes. And I was like, jeepers. Actually, later on, we were 20 performing Braveheart. It had never been done in Ireland before. It's like all of Fibbers showed up in the audience. It was like every metalhead in Ireland was in the audience for Braveheart, and half them had been in the FCA shots where they played, you know, where they had the famous bum scene, you know. But years later, that Uilleann Piper played at our wedding. Eric Rigler.
So was working with orchestras then something that you wanted to do from
Always.
From that point? Okay.
Yeah. Always. There's another story of the Army of Band of the Western Command came to my school, and I was in third year, and they asked the music teachers, is there anyone that can sit in and sight read with the band? So myself and one other girl sat in and played. We were, you know, decent woodwind players, played with the band. And the conductor turns to me in the middle of the concert and goes, all right, you're up next. And I turned to the guy next to me. I said, what does he mean, you're up next? And he goes, he'll bring you up on the podium. It's just kind of a laugh. Wave your arms around. All the kids will laugh, and just don't worry about it. Little did they know. I'd been practicing in my parents' attic for years, you know. And there was two things about this day that I remember. One was that feeling of being equally as terrified and excited about something, that it's like I'm as horrified to do it as not do it. And that's when you know you're in exactly the right place. Yeah. The other was I got up to conduct the band, opened the score, made all the 600 girls behind me wait until I figured it out. Where's the euphonium? There's the tuba player, all of this thing. And I conducted the piece and read it and performed it. And in the moment, I could feel my crazy neurotic brain quiet down. It was like time slowed down. I'm not joking, this happens in performance. A lot of performers will tell you this. And everything aligned, and I felt like I'm in the right place. And that's a feeling I come back to all the time. And when people were telling me, you can't do this as a career, this is impossible, what are you doing, blah, blah, blah. I'd come back to that feeling and go, well, that feeling cannot be wrong. It was so vivid and strong. But afterwards, I was packing up my instrument. I was coming out of the town hall in Ballinasloe. A whole lot of the band members were there, and one of them goes, myself and the lads, come here, myself and the lads, we're talking, and we all think you should be a conductor, you know? And you could have written me a check for €1 million or given me those words from professional musicians. You know, to me, that was the dream. You know, these guys were doing it for a living.
So I want to ask you a few very specific questions about conducting, but before I get there, but it was composition and performance is what you actually studied, wasn't it?
So I, very young, moonlighting as the guy who was teaching, the guy who was conducting the Ballinasloe Music Society taught in Athlone Community College, and the National Chamber Choir was doing a composition program workshop, which they ran for many, many years. And the community college was picked, and he said to me in rehearsal one day, he goes, come here, do you want to write something for this and come in with us? So I skipped school, and I went to this workshop, and Colin Mobby was the conductor, and he gave out Sting to me. Again, here I'm getting given out to, and he goes, your handwriting's appalling. I can't read a thing, blah, 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 you know. And I said, well, I'm only 15 and I'm not a professional. I'm just learning and I don't know how to do this. And I was taking out my Beethoven piano sonatas. We didn't have the imslp.org. We couldn't download scores online. It was whatever I could find in school or in the library, and there wasn't much. So I was trying to learn from my piano sonatas. What does a tenor clef look like, you know? So I was giving out to him, he was giving out to me, the choir were behind him going, you know? And they performed the piece, and he had one of the tenors perform it, and I'd written a round, but the round was in the middle of it. I had a canon in the middle of the piece, and it was written, I remember everything. It was written to the crotchet instead of the eighth note, but they performed it, the eighth note, the quaver. So they performed it to the quaver instead of the crotchet, and it was wrong. And I was fuming. Now, they could barely read my handwriting, let's be honest. And I was fuming, and Colin comes up to me and he goes, if you fix that score, we will perform it on RTE, you know, in the proper RTE voice. And up in Dublin Castle, I was absolutely, my first live performance by a professional ensemble, my first broadcast. I was 15 years of age. And Colin, so I got on to, was the youngest person on the Innes Imro Composition Summer School, taught by amazing composers from all over the world. There was only 10 or 12 of us in the class. I got sent the thing saying, you've been accepted. I didn't apply, it was Colin. And then I got onto the UCLA Extension film scoring program. I was just after doing my Leaving Cert. I had no business being there after my Leaving Cert. Again, I think it was Colin. I got my acceptance in the letter, in the mail. I hadn't applied for it at all, you know? So your angels are really, really important, you know.
And so I mean, conducting always fascinates me because there you are, so, you know, in charge of all these musicians. But talk about where's the opportunity? Not the opportunity, but where is the room to fail as a conductor? Because you can't kind of walk into the National Concert Hall and see an orchestra for 24 hours, and then you have your audience in front of you.
Samuel Beckett, fail again, fail better.
So you're doing that publicly. So you're learning as you're physically performing it. Wow.
It's excruciating. There's a reason why most of the conductors that you see have grey hair, because you can't. I mean, you can learn technique, you can practice. You know, you can film yourself. I mean, when I started as a student, I started quite young, actually. I was doing master classes in Manhattan School of Music. I was 19 years of age. I studied with the Professor Emeritus from Juilliard when he retired and moved to Cambridge. I used to go over and back with him. But everything with me was by accident. I'd trip and fall into something because I knew nobody, you know. So I was learning technique quite young. So I'd practice in the mirror, but you're looking at the opposite to everything that you're trying to do. And later on filming yourself and so on. But it's totally different when you're in front of the orchestra because it's overwhelming, this mass of sound and all of these different types of frequency coming at you. And even visually, a mass of people with all these instruments, because I need to be able to look around the room and find Nina's eyes out of the middle of, and yours, you know, out of a crowd of people to cue somebody, cue the third clarinet in the middle of something, although they rarely get their own.
And so, how hard is it to, because you must be doing so many things when you're conducting, because so you have to be kind of compartmentalizing what you're actually doing in the moment in terms of what you're hearing, and then you're also responding to what they've done and how they've reacted to what you've asked them to do. And then you're thinking ahead in terms of what's coming, like
Absolutely.
2 beats ahead of the score. Talk a little bit about that, because that sounds like sheer madness.
It is madness. A friend of mine refers to it as time travel, because you are reacting to what's just happened. You're in the moment right now of what's happening, and you're thinking ahead because you're thinking, who needs to get a cue for this, or how am I shaping the music, or is there a tempo change coming up, or what do I need to see? I learned to drive in a day in Los Angeles, by the way, because I had no choice. And I thought to myself, I'm conducting, there are obstacles coming my way, I need to head them off before they get to me, and that's how I totally thought of it. And it's all of those 3 things at once. I consider it like a DOP, a director of photography, when it's like pulling focus. So sometimes you have a wide shot, sometimes you need to focus in on this one element, sometimes you're foreground and background, sometimes it's all together. You know, and it's like this is all happening inside your brain at once, really, really, really fast. If you think too much about it, I'm getting a headache. You know, it's so much of
and
it's
then for the
innate.
musician, so you're there and you're a very physical conductor, and obviously the whole act of conducting is physical. But you're an incredibly physical conductor, just from watching videos of you working, and you're incredibly animated. So in terms of them sort of reading you, so they're in a way like, obviously they're hearing notes themselves as they're reading the score, but they're also they're responding to this silent activity that's in front of them, and you in turn are trying to draw the noise and the sound from them. So I find it endlessly fascinating watching conductors and orchestras together.
You also need to be a decent mix engineer when it's just you and the orchestra and the choir, you know, balancing things and so on. But for me, it's about inhabiting what I'm seeing on the page, and music has character. You know, is it a really sort of pointillistic type of Danny Elfman quirky thing, or is it, you know, really rich, dark Bruckner? How is it really, really thick and muddy, or is it light and airy? It's like the way an actor works. You're inhabiting, but I'm reading it, and I'm inhabiting what I'm reading. If I get enough time, I get to memorize it, which is even more fun. But then inhabiting it, I have a language. So conducting technique is like movements that are almost like words in a language. What you do with the words then is up to you. And then what kind of accent you have, who you studied with, and where you grew up influences the accent, the musical accent you have, and how your style of conducting. Every conductor has different style. There are specific schools of conducting. For me, I studied with lots of different conductors, but the one that really made an impact was Gerhard Markson, who studied with Igor Markevich. And he very much inhabits Igor Markevich's style. And Markevich studied with Nadia Boulanger. And she's the legend, she's the maven. She taught Charles Ives, she taught Leonard Bernstein, she taught Quincy Jones, actually, for a while. She taught Radu Lupu, she taught all of these amazing people, and Markevich was amazing. His teaching assistant for 13 years and his protege was Gerhard. So I couldn't believe it when Gerhard came to do guest appearances initially with the National Symphony Orchestra while I was studying at Trinity. Because I'd studied different styles with different conductors, and I knew what it was like to be a mismatch of styles with people. Like, I can change style if I need to, but I know what feels good to me. I also knew I wanted to work in film, and in order to synchronize the picture, we use something called a click track, and you need to be absolutely on point on this tick, tick, tick in your ear. But those points are not where the music happens. The music happens in and around them, and to be able to ingest that and to really have a technique where you can have everything happen, a beat ahead, what's happening. I'm giving everything an entire beat ahead. Whereas when you're in the concert hall, you can have ba. So I can be on the beat and everyone is late after me. Mm-hmm. That's a different animal. And great.
So how often would you? I want to go on to your film work now in a moment as well. But so how often do you find yourself sort of like needing to change the tone and the feel of what an orchestra are giving to you that isn't quite like what you thought it might be when you go on constantly?
Constant. Yeah. I had an experience recently. That story about the Army Band of the Western Command. I was talking to a colleague of mine years later, and I was telling him that story, and he goes, "What year was that?" And I said, "I did my junior cert in," and he goes, "That was me." Yeah, that was me. And I was like, "Liam Daly, really, that was you?" So he goes, "Do you know who else was in the band then?" The first woman to ever get enlisted into the Army Band, Barbara Dowling. She was in the band that day. And Barbara was on radio recently with Ray Darcy talking about being diagnosed with MS and 3 brain tumours in the same few weeks. And she gives them all names. So the 2 dormant ones have other names, but Mildred is the one that's given us trouble. So she decided her favourite music is Christmas music. We'll have Christmas music in June because you don't know who's going to be around for Christmas. She had 200 of us show up, all professional musicians, and performed this madcap. I did Ellen Silvestri's Polar Express score, a huge choir, children's choir, soloist. Absolutely, we all showed up. And I get up to conduct the orchestra. I'm looking in the orchestra, and there's at least 10 people from the orchestra I set up when I was 19 years of age. and they're all in the concert orchestra, the symphony orchestra, the army band, the Garda band. You know, we all showed up for, and anyway, I get up to conduct. I'm like, hi, Bren, how Roddy, how, you know, and I haven't seen them in 20 years, you know. And we're doing a piece that Craig wrote called Psycho Bells, which is Bernard Herrmann, who wrote the score to Psycho, meets Jingle Bells, right? So it's like, you know, that's exactly the opening of it, right? So I'm hearing this in my head before we start. I'm hearing it. There's all these people I know and love since I was a child. This is their first time to ever work with me, right? Except the ones that knew me as a student. Big upbeat, and didn't hear what I was expecting at all. And then it continued, stop, everybody, stop. And I'm thinking, oh my God, did we send them the wrong set of parts? Oh my God, self-blame straight away. Is this the wrong music? Oh my God, major screw up. The concert's in a few hours, right? And I could see the players laughing. And then I'm listening and I'm going, this is AC/DC Back in Black. And I turn around and I see two composer friends behind me peeing themselves, laughing at my reaction. Because I'm like, stop, everyone. Oh my God, what's going wrong? Oh my God, wrong parts, wrong parts. Wait a second. Then I started conducting. I jumped off the podium and then got back on again. Somebody read somewhere that before a stressful concert, I listened to Back in Black by AC/DC, right? Because it gets my rhythm just settled. Bam, you know? And so they played it for me. But all of those gang, there were so many of the people from my childhood that were there. But that was me. There's a perfect example of getting up, hearing it in my head, expecting exactly what I want to hear on the downbeat. And that the movement I will give them will reflect exactly the type of attack, the type of sound. Is it like a spike or is it a spill? What kind of, is it heavy? Is it sharp? What is the attack on something that's big and loud like that? And I did not get what I was expecting. But yeah, it's instantaneous, it's constantly changing.
And obviously, I mean, you came to huge prominence when you conducted at the Oscars in 2020. Tell us a little bit about that and how that kind of came about.
So it's one of those things where I wasn't doing anything different. I was doing the same thing I've been doing for my entire career. And I did a little bit of work with Ricky Minor, who's the music director for the Grammys and was for the Oscars that year. And he does the Super Bowl and things like that. So Ricky would have been gorgeous Whitney Houston's music director and lots of amazing artists. And he'd asked me to help out on something. And I was working on the Maria Callas project. And I was like, Ricky, you've got to see how difficult this thing is. We were synchronizing a hologram using all of Callas's original vocal recordings. We had technically used basically phase cancellation, where you phase out, you put two frequencies together that cancel each other out to get rid of the orchestra from behind her voice. So the orchestra was live, and she was known for being very, very rubato, which means that she very much interpreted things, meandered, moved, and nothing was like that. So when you're trying to get an orchestra to match her when we're not in the same room together, and it's after the fact, we're not breathing together, we're not, giving each other signals, nothing like that. It was the most complex synchronization I've ever worked with, and Craig and I designed it. And we used both. I had a screen with visual cues. The audience couldn't see, it was flat. I had a counter. I had what we call punches and streamers, which are real old Hollywood technique of, you get a 2-second streamer. They would take a piece of film. They'd get a ruler on a frame and draw a green streamer was go, but you'd see it coming across your screen. It would take about 2 seconds, 2-second streamer. And by the time it got to the end, you get a flash, a punch, and that's your downbeat. It tells you where to start back in the day, and they'd use a clock. We still use them, even though they're digitally created, to tell you, you're about to, here's synchronizing with this. I have the click in my ear, I have that. I have all the bells and whistles to synchronize with this hologram. I'm showing Ricky Minor, and he's going, oh my God, that is horrifying. And it was, every orchestra was like, this is impossible, this is not going to work. And we'd only have 2 rehearsals to do 90 minutes of music, you know. And it did work. And it worked so well that in Salle Pleyel in Paris, a very irate audience member came up to our Grammy Award-winning mix engineer, who, by the way, had to put us in the same room as Callas sonically, even though not all of her stuff was recorded in the same space. So he was constantly changing the psychoacoustical environment that we were all in together. It was amazing.
So before we go back to the Oscars, so just explain to us a little bit about the Callas hologram. How did that work? I'm sure we've all seen photographs recently of the ABBA hologram concert in London. Is it a similar kind of a thing?
It predated that. It was the same company that did Roy Orbison, but this was the first time we had a scrim of silver thread that went all the way across the front of the theatre. And she would walk out on stage. First, you'd hear the footsteps. They did Foley, they did everything. I can't tell you how they made the hologram because they'd kill me. But she'd walk out, you'd hear her dress swishing as she walked out, and people would gasp. It was written by the head of the opera department at Juilliard. He's one of the directors for the Met, Stephen Wadsworth. And when they had called me to do it, it was like everyone saying this is impossible. They had this opera conductor in New York take 4 days to rehearse 2 arias and 2 overtures, you know. And he said, this is, you know, this is not possible, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, we didn't know it was possible until the first performance was done. You know, then we're like, okay, it works. But your guy in Salle Pleyel in Paris said, I didn't come here to watch an orchestra mime. And I was like, oh, really? Thank you so much. we were so pin perfect with her that he thought we were miming.
But go back to Hollywood then. So how?
So what was I talking about?
I was just asking, how did the Oscars gig
Oh,
come
yeah.
about?
So he saw this unbelievably difficult project, and we were working together on something else. And the other one was Chris Walden, who's the producer for Michael Bublé, who I text every Christmas and go, you're everywhere, you know. He writes all those beautiful big band charts that you hear on all Bublé's stuff, and he's amazing Austrian export to Los Angeles. I'd worked with him on something, and his big Grammy Award-winning big band I convinced to play our wedding for Union Scale as well, you know, divilment all the time. So when it came to the Oscars, Craig, my husband, is not the glass is half full or half empty. The glass is all the way full all the time. It is so annoying. It is. I have a good hefty Galway dose of pessimism, you know. So Craig comes to me. We're in Dublin. We'd come home to record Mo Honan's score to Mo Honan's 2x2. Motion Films, Galway production company, world class, absolutely amazing. Come home to record the score for her film, and I get a email from Ricky saying, "What are you doing? What's your availability between this date and this date in February?" Craig comes in and goes, "You got an email from Ricky. I think he wants you to conduct at the Oscars." I'm like, "How do you get? What's your availability?" How do you get from naught to 120 in one ambiguous line of text? You know?
But he was right.
So he was right. It was so weird. So he calls me and he goes, yeah, well, there's all these people on the list, and there's this person and that person. There's a couple of Oscar winners and people that I loved. And then there was like a couple of serious political clout contenders. And I was like, oh, well, it's really nice to be on the list. Thank you for thinking of me. Nice to be a contender. Bye now, you know. And he's like, wait, hold on a second now, because we need to talk about this. And I said, oh, Ricky, look, I'm here, whatever you want, anytime. But I also didn't want to invest any hope into it. That's the other Irish thing, right? And he's like, no, I know they're this and that and the other, but we need someone with real chops who can deal with the pressure, who has the technique, who has the skills, who's known by the industry, who won't be seen as a prop or like that the film scoring industry will get behind and that kind of thing. So, or as tokenism and all that kind of thing. They were creating a space and they wanted it to be honored and all of that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Well, yeah, sure. I'd be, you know, it sounds like a lot of fun. I know most of the orchestra. I'd worked with them my whole career, you know. It's only now I'm working with the Irish orchestras, but the The LA gang, I knew them all personally, and I knew.
And so
they're
then
playing.
once that was confirmed, how much time did you have from like to prepare? And secondly, so you're obviously you're conducting a medley of presumably 4 or 5 nominees.
Right.
So who's making the selection in terms of the piece of music from that you're going to perform?
So the nominees, they hadn't been nominated yet, and then the nominees came out, and I'm trying not to pay any attention to anything, and then I get this call. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which is 8 a.m. in Los Angeles, and it was, "Hi, Eimear, this is Ricky." Well, welcome to the Oscars 2020. You know, I was like, well, that preamble, I would say, you make a great actor. You know, that preamble didn't last very long. I said, how? I don't have any political clout. I don't know anybody. And he goes, well, neither did I. He goes, I didn't either. I worked my way up. And, you know, people say, well, how did you get that gig? Every gig I got was from the last one. Every single one. There was never nepotism. There was never clout. Nothing.
But did you arrange what was performed that night?
I didn't do the arrangements. They had, so the team, I knew all the teams. So Chris Walden was the principal arranger. He supervised everything. He does the Grammys as well with Ricky. And what I didn't know was that Chris had put my name on the list to begin with. Because so by the time it got to Ricky, the list was complete. The producers had okayed it. And then eventually they said to him, you know, there's all this pressure coming from here, there, and everywhere. You're the music director. You pick. So it was very authentic. It was the musicians that put me there, and the orchestra. I knew all the gang, and it was great. But what was really cool, I kept getting asked about what actors did you meet by the press and all this kind of thing. I was like, are you not going to ask me what it felt like to conduct John Williams with John Williams sitting there? Like, really? And Thomas Newman with Thomas Newman sitting there? And you know, by the way, I know Thomas's sister Maria. She's an excellent concert music composer. Amazing. She's my favorite Newman. You know, and he goes to me, he goes, Maria says you're okay. And I was like, thanks, before the thing. And it was just, for me, my heroes were there.
Were you nervous?
You know? No, I wasn't nervous at all. I got asked that a lot by journalists beforehand, and I was like, well, do you know something I don't know? Because I knew the level of professionalism I knew the audio team, I knew the whole gang. You know, when you work in the recording studios over there, everybody is so fast, so slick. Everybody has such passion about their part of the process. We had lots of rehearsal time, which I never get anymore for anything. And I knew the music. I was given a few days to prepare, which for me, for 2.5 minutes of music was lots. You know, it was great. It was just such an honor. And something really weird happened as well, where all of these serendipitous things happened, you know, which were so bizarre. One of the things that happened was I'd listened to AC/DC before a concert. It doesn't matter if I was doing opera or video game music or whatever, same. But it was a particularly stressful one. If there was a really expensive production where there's lots of warring egos and all this kind of thing, and I'm getting pushed out, and this has happened a bunch of times. It was always Lose Yourself by Eminem I'd listen to, right? And I'm sitting there chatting with, it was all Elton John's backing singers. We were having such crack backstage, having a laugh. I wasn't in my dressing room, I was hanging out with them. And the next thing, right before I go out, I'm getting ready to go out, next thing is a surprise. And I'd seen everyone rehearse. Surprise, there's Eminem on the screen in front of me performing Lose Yourself. I was like, thanks, Dad. Hilarious, by the way. You know, it was the producer's surprise for her best friend, who was his biggest fan. The producer had a secret, he'd never picked up his award for 8 Mile. So they had him perform, was like a couple of things before me. But there was a whole lot of things where serendipity came. You know, it's almost like all of the things that had to happen for me to be there at all, you know.
Yeah. And has that made a big difference now in terms of, obviously, in terms of recognition?
Oh,
Does anybody ever call you Eimear anymore? Because didn't Sigourney Weaver, I think it was?
Changed my name to
Eimear.
Yeah, it's my new name.
Well, I'm sure it's probably a difficult name for most Americans to pronounce in any case.
Well, Alex is my name in Starbucks, you know.
Alex.
Yeah. I've retired a few before I got to Alex. But Eimear, yeah, I didn't. The other thing was they had stand-ins in the rehearsal, and I wasn't really paying attention to what was going on before. I was waiting for my audio cues, and I was getting ready to do my thing. And I also didn't know what the cameras were going to capture, but I knew all of the audience would see me on screen separately, so that they'd see the whole performance. And since I am used to just performing to an audience as well, that's really important to me. So I was waiting for that, and the next thing I see the 3 superheroes on the screen, I was like, oh, gee, you know. And then I didn't expect them to call out my name and give me this big introduction, or Sigourney Weaver, or Brie Larson, or that beautiful Israeli girl, Wonder Woman. Thank you. Gal Gadot, amazing girl. But it was so much fun. It was really special.
So just to shift things, I presume there's some gaming fans who were here. So how does that whole world work, and how did your kind of first entry into that happen, to write scores for?
By accident. Yeah, story of my life. Oh, by the way, lockdown, we had all these things flooding in it was like having your first #1 hit, all the opportunities coming, and it's crazy, everything's going crazy, and then wipe out 2 years of, now we did work through COVID, but at 10%, you know, no performances, nothing, everything cancelled, and some beautiful things that may never happen again, you know, that just got wiped out. But gaming, so again, you know, random stuff. I'm in college, we're in the Buttery Bar after chapel choir. The chapel choir in Trinity, you're sight reading every week, everything from plain chant to messian to ask Donnacha Dennehy all about it. He would have been in chapel choir as a student as well.
So Donnacha Dennehy is the composer, along with Enda Walsh, the librettist for The First Child, which is running across the corridor there at the Billy Allen next week. So
he was both a Trinity music graduate and he was teaching there when I was a composition student. So he was actually one of my composition teachers. But we're always the music students sing in the chapel choir, because you have to be able to sight sing and so on. And then we go to the pub afterwards. And in rocks David Downs, who was in 4th year when I think I was 1st year. And David, you'll know from Celtic Woman. So David created Celtic Woman. We were a small department, but we were industrious, you know. And he goes, what are you all doing tomorrow? We're like, well, you know, we have ear training in the morning, but after that, you know, nothing, library, which we didn't go to much anyway. So he said, will you come out and do a session in some studio that I think no longer exists? And I remember being on the carpet, handwriting, pencil, SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass parts for this Japanese composer, for this thing. It was a video game. And then there was a bunch of us from Trinity, and a whole lot of Anuna heads and Maynooth and UCD.
So what year are we talking about now?
This would have been, if I was 1st year, 1996.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't say that. Wikipedia, I can't escape, no matter what I do, right? Damn that thing. So we all go down to the studio, and there's a bunch of people that, you know, later went on to do, you know, Anuna has produced so many people, oh my gosh. Simon Morgan, the singer, would have been there. There was a whole lot of us. Well, about 12, I'd say. But later on, I'm in college. My brother calls me in a panic. And he goes, oh my God, myself and the lads are here playing Metal Gear Solid. Did you work on Metal Gear Solid? I was like, no. And he goes, I'm pretty sure you did. We're looking at your credit at the end of the game. I was like, what? Maybe it's a different Eímear Noone. And because there are so many. And he goes, actually, there was a girl in Trinity a year ahead of me in the drama department. I was like, oh, if she becomes a really famous actor, I'm lost. But it was Metal Gear Solid, which is now a classic game, which is sad. But my next credit, moonlighting and screen training Ireland from after my leaving cert all through college on the film scoring program, I did an orchestration. They brought over the orchestrator that did Ali, The Insider. He did a lot of the Batman stuff. He did, all of this stuff. And I was after performing some of his orchestrations, coincidentally, at the National Concert Hall with the orchestra that myself and Gillian set up. And when he was talking about his work, I said, "Oh, which part of the Batman score?" And he said, "Waltz to the Death, with where the Joker is." I was like, "This one," and I sang it for him, and I sang the cello, the cello line, and not just the tune. And he's like, "How do you know that?" And I was like, "Well, I just performed it at the National Concert Hall." And he hired me as his assistant from that class. And my first gig was working with a composer called Jason Hayes, his first ever orchestral score. And he was sending the MIDI via this orchestrator to me. And I was doing it in my flat in Portmarnock. And I was brought over to do the recording sessions. I was just after finishing Trinity, just finished my undergrad. The recording sessions were in a university in Southern California, because Blizzard was new and they didn't know what this game was going to do, and we didn't have the budget. So here we were, my first orchestration job, and I only wanted to orchestrate so I could become a better composer and conductor. Jason's first orchestral score, he went on to become the audio director at Riot Games. He did a lot more for Blizzard. I just performed his music at the Royal Albert Hall. We've known each other since then, but it turned out to be the first World of Warcraft. Wow. It was my second gig in video games, and it was because role-playing games were new. I remember looking up at the cinematic and seeing this incredible animation that had so much emotion to it, and I went, "Oh my God, this is new, and this is special." I knew in the studio that it was special.
And so now, are those largely finished by the time you start, or is any of that working in tandem? Or
yeah, it depends. So what we would have done then was we were recording the cinematic. So the cinematic is a story that sets up the gameplay. So here's where you are, here are the characters, here's the lore, as we call it, the mythology behind everything. And that's very much like an animated short film, for want of better terms. So we score it like a film. We have edits that we have to deal with. We've dialogue we have to deal with, and all of that stuff.
Are you dealing with any soundscape people? So like sound designers?
Sound design, yeah, but we're not listening to sound design when we're scoring. So
does that come later?
The fight between the composers and the sound designers comes later in the dub, always. And they always want to be louder than us. We always want to be louder than them. There's somewhere there's a compromise. Then you have in-game music, where we get to be a lot freer. The in-game music is you're setting up an environment, an emotional space. You're setting up a fantastical world. You want to bring people out of your daily life and your bills and your problems and your cars needs to be fixed and your this list, to-do list, bringing everybody into a fantasy land. Throw all of that aside. In order to do that, we take music, and it's in a process of immersion in, not the one that I forgot to turn off before I came out, by the way, but it's a process of taking your audience, your player, and really fully bringing them into this world. So we get to be very free with that. We don't know when dialogue's going to happen, so we can't worry about tripping over dialogue. Like if you have somebody stating a really brilliant line, you can't handle the truth, and the trumpet player's going da 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 da. You can't do that because you're distracting from the main meat of what's going on. You can do that in the spaces in between, depending on what's going on. But in-game music, we don't have to score that way. So, in fact, in-game music lends itself to the concert hall really well because we can be expansive. Game directors and producers often say things like, we want a sonic identity, we want a big theme, we want the hero version of this. We want people to hear this music and know exactly what franchise it is. I love hearing that. It's harder for me when I have to do a textural score for a live action film where people are worried about foreshadowing of the action or giving away too much what the character's thinking or being melodramatic or making a music video out of the film, all these. Whereas game directors, they want more is more is more. Can we have the 90-piece symphony orchestra, the 80-piece choir, a hurdy-gurdy, a ram's horn, an electric guitar? You know, you'd think I'm making this up. I'm not making this up. And composers are kids in the candy store, you know, with that stuff.
Incredible. So do you think that's making an impact in terms of audience to listen to classical music, inverted commas?
100%.
Yeah, because I mean, like they're mind-boggling statistics of the hundreds of millions who've listened to your work. But like, are they coming to sit in? Because when you perform some of that work, I think you were saying to me earlier or a couple of weeks ago that you generally don't tend to perform it with the animation running behind. It's just the score. So
I have done both, where you have. Might have gameplay on screen or some visuals on screen while you're playing, and it's synchronized, and you'd have a lot of track and a lot of things from the OST, the original soundtrack. We'd have some stems that we're working with that aren't live, and then you have the live, and that's a different scenario. One of the things that I love to do is strip it all down to the music, some creative lighting, but all about the concert we did, the National Concert Hall, or the Royal Albert Hall, was the Royal Phil, the Crouch End Choir, it's an amazing choir, and I brought a wonderful young Irish artist with me called Aisling McGlynn. And I've known Aisling and her family for a long time. Her dad is Michael McGlynn, created Eímear Noone. And Aisling's after singing 2 tracks on one of the biggest, baddest releases of this year, which is Chrono Radical Dreamers. A huge game. And because we've you know, Eímear Noone has worked on a lot of games, I brought the team over from Blizzard Activision to record them on Diablo 3, which is a BAFTA-nominated score. Hosier was in the choir at the time. You know, there's so much richness. And we had a heaven and a hell choir for Diablo, and Eímear Noone was the hell choir. Yeah, the seductiveness of hell, you know. Whereas the Knights Templar, we went to Abbey Road and recorded London Voices for this kind of Knights Templar kind of heaven choir. But so Aisling sung on this major release, so I was like, hey, an excuse to bring her with me. And here she was, her debut at the Royal Albert Hall with the Royal Phil, a few days before she did her leaving cert, you know.
Amazing.
So I'll never forget her face, because this audience, I prime the audience before she comes out. So I'll come out and I'll perform something, and I'll say to everybody, you know, you're in this beautiful concert hall. You have this amazing orchestra, world famous, with this incredibly rich tradition of playing, this stunning instruments, this, you know, wonderful environment. You might be feeling a little bit like, where do I look? What do I do? Do I clap? Do I not clap? I've heard there's a thing about clapping or not clapping in between things in orchestral music, you know. What do I do? And I said, well, I have shaken hands with literally tens of thousands of video game music fans around the world, because this audience expects to meet you afterwards, do meet and greets. I've literally shaken hands with tens of thousands of people. And they always say to me, my favorite song is, and always, it could be, we call them pieces, but my favorite song is the Dragonborn theme from Elder Scrolls, or the main theme from World of Warcraft, or whatever. And then I'll say to them, does that mean your favorite band is the orchestra? And they go, gee, I never thought of it that way, but you're right. And what's interesting is what used to be your grandparents' music is now, when people spend hours and hours and hours inside the environment of a game, and they're listening to orchestral music of people of all ages, there's an imprinting that's happening, because you're living inside of that music for not just 2 hours of watching a movie or a concert or whatever. You're living in it for quite some time. And the orchestral sonority has become so normalized inside of video games that it's just brilliant. So I say to them, okay, well, tonight, everybody, your favorite band is the Royal Philharmonic. And when you hear something that stirs you emotionally, that makes you excited, I want you to cheer like this. And the audience goes, yay! And I look at the concertmaster going, what do you think, Stephanie? And she's like, I'm like, yeah, it's pretty weak, right?
Lame.
When you hear something that cheer like this, and then it's kind of like the brass, you know, and then eventually you get that huge cheer, everybody roars laughing, and you can feel the tension dissipate. It's amazing. Every time you can feel this, the audience is a different audience. So Aisling coming out on stage, she's coming out head down, you know, she's an absolute pro, and I knew she could handle it, you know, but, you know, a little bit of the butterflies, naturally enough. She's walking out head down. Next thing, she gets this massive cheer before she's sung a note, because she worked on the original soundtrack for Radical Dreamers. And she just does this, like taken aback, and the smile just peels across her face. And it was magic, absolutely. I was so proud. It was great.
Yeah, it's great to see orchestras just like gaining that kind of new audience like that. It's the one thing I've loved actually about the symphony, our own symphony here, and the RTE Concert Orchestra, you know, doing, you know, slightly more populist kind of you know, things like Jenny Green DJ stuff, or orchestra. Like we've had them do those kind of gigs in the Big Top a couple of times, and to see, you know, 3,000 people kind of go ballistic to an orchestra is kind of fantastic. So so what's next? I know you're sort of dividing your time now between Los Angeles and, actually, you know what? I never actually asked you, why did you go to LA to begin with?
So I went to LA because I didn't want to be boxed in. I love my classical music. I remember one week doing Stravinsky's Soldier's Tale with the trumpet player who originally did it with Stravinsky, because he lived in Los Angeles for a good chunk of time. I remember doing that, an Hispanic record date, a Latin record date, and a bunch of movie trailers and a film score all in 1 week. And I thought, that's me. This is me. I don't want everybody to say, oh, she only does early Schoenberg, just hire her for that. Any one of these things would bore me to tears if that was all I was doing.
It's an opportunity.
So I wanted to, and everything, like I did, one of the things that, well, Stravinsky's Soldier's Tale is a piece that changed me as a musician, but working with Gladys Knight's band, having to groove R&B grooves with an orchestra, it changed me how I now interpret classical music. How learning how deep the pocket is, and learning about the groove, and how far on the back of the beat you can be, how far forward and top of the beat, and all the great gradations in between. I've learned so much that I bring to all different types of music from other music. And that's always what it's a musical curiosity that never ends.
And you said to me that you're building a studio in County Galway, back near your home place. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's really for our use and to give to our friends when we're not using it, you know, because we want to facilitate artists recording without having to have massive expenses. And we need it for our own use anyway. So we've built, we have a wonderful full-time young composer working with us, Sarah Haid. We have 3 workstations. We have a vocal booth / you know, an ISO booth for a single player or an actor. And then we have a multi-use space that's a dub stage where we can mix sound for the cinema, so we know exactly what it's going to sound like in the cinema, in Dolby Atmos and surround and all that kind of stuff. We also have a green screen in there, and we're going to be able to record, you know, a band or a string quartet, and coordinate with the ISO booth and so on. It's really us putting down roots. So basically we can work really hard all day, bring friends in, and then walk to the pub in Kilconnell at the end of the day. It's the life, you know, it's perfect. But yeah, we'll be excited to bring lots of friends in and do things.
I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. Your enthusiasm and your energy is infectious. We could talk to you all evening. But I'm just wondering if we have any questions from the audience. If so, if you want to raise your hand. We have a couple of roving microphones if anybody has a question for Eimear. Shy audience, Eimear, aren't they?
I'm going to get them all to cheer in a minute.
While they're having a little ponder, maybe. So, what are the? You're going to Rome on Sunday to do
Milan.
the Milan, sorry, for the Stuart Copeland opera. And what's coming down the road after that? Or
so, what's coming after that? Oh my God, headache. So diversification is something that I'm passionate about. I'll give you the last week and the week coming, and this is kind of typical in non-COVID times. Monday, I have a radio show with Classic FM called High Score. So I went there, recorded 2 shows for them on Monday, came back that day, went to LA the next day. We recorded, there's a massive game out of China. They make about $15 million on this game a day, which is why I'm always going, Ireland, 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 over here, all employ IT experts, artists, programmers, directors, producers, writers, musicians, animators, blah, blah, blah. We are perfect and never get off that soapbox. We could employ, you know, all of our creative professionals forever and a day in that industry, you know. I recorded over there. We had a massive production. We built out the stage at Royce Hall, which is on the UCLA campus. It's famous for its acoustic. Like, for instance, John Williams recorded Memories of a Geisha there with Yo-Yo Ma and Itzhak Perlman. And I think that's the last time they did it. But we built out over the audience this massive stage. We had 90-piece orchestra and lots of amazing ethnic instruments. So we had the guzheng, which is like the koto, is the Chinese sort of version of the koto. We had a koto, which is Japanese. We had shakuhachi, we had the nei, we had what's it called, begins with B. We had the sitar, all in front of the orchestra. And we had a full film crew. We had Hollywood scoring, which are, you know, the guys that used to run the Sony scoring stage. We were spoiled. We filmed it. So it's literally going to be seen by hundreds of millions of people. It's just me and the orchestra and these amazing, beautiful ethnic instruments playing this video game score. And it's a beautiful score by a Chinese composer. And it's all of this international, amazing shakuhachi and bansura player, these woodwind instruments who plays with Yanni and is on tour with Hans Zimmer at the moment. Amazing artists. So that was last week. Came back on Sunday night. I'm here with you guys. Trying to learn an opera at the same time. Builders in doing the studio in East Galway and 2 small kids. And then Sunday I'm leaving to do the opera rehearse. And Stuart and I have already recorded most of it. We're recording some celebrity guest artists on the vocals in LA later in the year. Stuart Copeland was on the plane on my way back from LA because he's recording in Dublin. Police Deranged for Orchestra. Craig is producing both albums. And Stuart, we're trying to bring as much recording to Dublin and to Galway. So our little, you know, we're going to nab poor Contempo. They're going to be so sick of me, nabbed to come out to East Galway.
The wonderful ensemble in residence
yes,
here in Galway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a BBC mini-series coming up that I need to start while probably I'm in Milan.
How did the Stuart Copeland thing come about?
So Stuart and I have the same amazing manager, and he put out a call for arrangers to do this show, all these different arrangers. And she said to me, do you want to do, Stuart wants to know, do you want to do one? So he picks for me every breath you take, of course. And so Craig and I decided to do it together, and this is how we do it. He wanted a 2-minute preamble that was very symphonic at the beginning of the piece to open the second half, where the audience doesn't know yet what song it is, and you're just giving tiny little hints here and there in this blustery maelstrom of orchestra. And I wrote that 2-minute piece at the beginning of, and then as soon as you have this big silence, and he gives a drum fill, and every breath starts and the audience loses their mind and all this kind of stuff. So on the strength of that, Stuart invited Craig and I to just take on both projects. So I'm going to perform some of that with him. There's a wonderful conductor who's conducting that show. He's a producer of that show. But I'm going to dip in and do a couple of them in Budapest and somewhere else in August. I've forgotten. So while I'm in Italy, I'm working on the opera. We're doing our BBC miniseries. We're doing a wonderful animated feature film after that with Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie. It's Stephen Fry's production company in conjunction with our own Telegale. Woohoo!
Amazing.
Yeah. So we're the composers. Myself and Craig are co-writing that one. The director is Toby Genkel, who we also worked with on 2x2 Overboard.
Everything
so
connects.
Keeping the band together.
Actually, one other thing I wanted to ask you as well, just before I'm conscious of time, do you actually play games yourself?
Yeah, I have a rabid gamer in my house who's 8, and we fight every single day. Like, no more mobile games, no more mobile games. I almost said it, I can't tell you the game we just did, or I'd be lynched, but he's like, well, because you worked in that one, I should be able to play it. And I'm like, no, you're not 12 yet, you know.
Are they musical?
They are musical, yeah,
Fantastic.
they are musical. And actually, I'm putting together an album at the moment of tracks that are my 8-year-old is helping me to pick out.
Incredible.
We're doing versions of. So it's great to have the little sounding boards. He's obsessed with Roblox and Minecraft and stuff. And
Yeah.
I won't let him play anything that I've worked. He can play Zelda. He's allowed to have Zelda, but nothing else I've worked on is appropriate.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Well, Eimear, listen, thank you so much. It's been, I said, we could listen to you for hours and hours. You're a total breath of fresh air. And hopefully we'll have you back in a different capacity maybe in the next year or two to conduct. So please join me in thanking Eimear and thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Oh, I show the prop?
Yeah, sorry.
So I brought this prop. If you want to have a look at it, I'll just hand it. So
This is the baton.
So this is the one from the Academy Awards, and it's got himself on the handle there. If you want to have a look at it, but,
Himself being Oscar.
yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
A little bespoke.
Yes,
piece.
exactly. So
What instruments did you play yourself?
So my degree is actually in concert flute and composition, and I play piano. Yeah. A wonderful, wonderful lady from Ballinasloe called Mary Power was my piano teacher, and she'd pick me up from school, give me a sandwich, a piano lesson, and then go out and play a show in some town in East Galway somewhere, or in the Midlands. But another angel.
Incredible.
But
Thank
thanks
you.
for having me.
It's been our absolute pleasure, Eimear. Thank you so much.